Snug?
Well, there are a lot of little pieces. Just don't lose any of them. If one of those falls into a crack, it's going to be impossible to get it out.
Snug.
Hey, everybody. Casey, the nerdy photographer here. And after the last episode, we had tried using the reality shop program, and someone, I won't say who, applied a filter, and we've all been turned into action figures.
Snug, 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 snug. Snug, 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 snug.
I said I wasn't going to say who did it. Anyway, it's all quite fitting, because in this episode, we're talking to toy photographer Anthony Mattea. I was hooked on Anthony's portfolio the moment I saw a Green Lantern shot and an X-Men fastball special. His work is really great. Stay tuned after the break for the whole interview and get some tips and information on toy photography.
Snug.
Yeah, I'm reading the instruction manual. It's not helping.
Doc, what's up?
Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news.
Give me the bad news first.
Well, your website is incredibly slow and it's susceptible to being hacked.
I had a suspicion that was the case. What do you prescribe?
Use SiteGround as your website host. They offer fast, secure hosting for small and medium-sized websites, as well as managed WordPress hosting.
Can I pick up SiteGround at my local pharmacy?
No. You'll need to go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround to find out more.
Thanks. So, what's the good news?
You have 6 months to live.
That's good news?
Better than a week.
Well, you've got me there, Doc.
Hey there, do you like movies, cartoons, video games, anime, and everything in between? Then we have a show for you. The 4 Nerds by Nerds podcast. Every week, Josh and Ben bring you all the latest and greatest in movie reviews, news, commentaries, interviews, special guests, and tons of bonus episodes. New episodes come out every Monday. We also make great nerdy content on our YouTube channel. You can find our show anywhere podcasts are found. The 4 Nerds by Nerds podcast. Your one stop for all your nerdy needs. Stay nerdy, my friends.
Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett. Today, I have toy photographer Anthony Mattea with me. Welcome.
Hi.
Happy to have you join us. We're going to start out with the Dice Breaker. So this is a little icebreaker, gamified podcast segment, and it's a 9. That means, what was the worst investment you ever made in your photography business or gear? What's the worst thing you bought or invested in?
I bought a couple of tripods that just didn't work, but I recently bought some what do you call those? The reflectors.
Okay.
And they were like cardboard and stuff, and I could have just made them like out of tinfoil and stuff.
Oh, well, so for like for toys, yeah, like you could probably I do a lot of like DIY stuff. I just buy like foam, like small foam core pieces, and just use those for like still lifes and stuff like that. Like they just I can just use a clamp on that, whatever. I don't go out and buy stuff like that. I don't know, or get like a piece of plexiglass sometimes too, like black, whatever. Do you want a shiny little background for small stuff? Yeah, but that's what you're shooting. You're shooting like small things. Let's talk about that. Like you're shooting a lot of like small items. What inspired you to get into toy photography?
So it was during lockdown, and I was doing wildlife photography at the time, and then I found some Legos in the backyard. I guess it was some person who used to live in the house, the kid. And I had seen toy photography before, and I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot. And I just loved it from then on.
So this is a fairly new thing for you. Like this is
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years now.
it's amazing because I mean, like looking at your shots, they're great. I would have thought that you'd been doing this much longer. It's very funny. Also, one of my earlier guests on the podcast, like at the beginning of lockdown, was a guy who did an entire Lego shoot of a wedding couple, and then he did their he did this whole huge like Lego wedding, and then did their honeymoon as well, and like they were going to like all these exotic locations, but he like built all of the sets. It was the same thing. He had never done it before. He was just like, I've got these Legos. I'm gonna do this whole thing, and because I'm sitting at home and don't have anything else to do.
Wow, that's impressive.
But yeah, I mean, like your stuff is really great. It's sort of that thing that I aspire to. Like I had the same sort of idea. I was like going to do like, I've got all these Funkos. I was going to like do some like set up some stuff with these Funkos and do it, but like I never got to that point. So I really admire the fact that you actually like went with it and are very good at it. I actually had a question from one of our listeners. It's actually a comic book podcast called 10 Cent Takes. And their question was, how does toy photography differ from, like, say, standard portrait photography or still lifes?
Well, for me, the thing I like about it is that I can put the figure however I want. And, I can make a Superman figure fly. And that's a lot more challenging with a human being.
Yeah, you have a lot more, I guess, flexibility. But like from a technical aspect, what would you say is like the main difference from doing wildlife photography?
Let's see. I would say that it's doing everything in a smaller scale and getting up closer and like I use a big lens, but I can like go in deep to the shot.
Are you shooting with like a macro lens, or are you just shooting from far away with a telephoto?
Shooting from far away.
What lens are you using? What are you shooting with?
I use Canon 100-400. What was it? IS2 USM. Not very technical with mine.
Oh, it's a 100 to 400. Wow, it's like it kind of explains like looking at your shots, like the amount of compression there is on those elements. Everything like there's a lot of depth, and there might not actually be like a huge amount of depth because they're small figures, but like that makes a lot of sense actually. Like thinking about it afterwards. So like I'm looking at your shots, and like some of these I just find really amazing. My favorite has got to be the fastball special, like Colossus throwing Wolverine through the Sentinel. Like it just like takes me back to childhood comic book collecting. It's just like it's such a iconic type of like X-Men comic moment. But my question for you is, how do you visualize this stuff beforehand? Like when you're setting this up, you're going like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like, what's your process for sort of putting together, like coming up with the idea, and then sort of, I don't know, do you like kind of storyboard it, or you just think, I just start putting the figures out there and start like trying to make it work, or how do you do it?
I go on Pinterest a lot and find photos of like, say, like you were talking about Colossus, and trying to find those the fastball specials, seeing what shots they kind of use, and then actually going out there and then seeing what works. Because there's a lot of times that I'll put them down and it just doesn't work right, or I have to change the focus. Because I remember I was doing it wasn't Wolverine flying into Colossus. It was into the Sentinel. It was just me. It was just Colossus throwing Wolverine.
Right.
And I had to change the focus from Wolverine to Colossus, and sometimes it didn't work. So it's a lot of just experimenting.
A lot of like, what's the word? What's the phrase I'm thinking of? Try and I don't know. Just try and see what works. Just throwing it out there.
Trial and error.
Yes, that is exactly the term I think. A lot of trial and error. Yeah, that's how I learned photography in the first place was just a lot of like self-taught stuff to just figure out. Oh, does this work? Well, nope. All right, we'll try something different. But on that, on that sort of like, I see a lot of X-Men stuff. Also, one of the things that sort of drew me to your work, I'm a huge Green Lantern fan, so that like that photo you recently posted of Green Lantern and like the process of doing all the composition on the different elements, because it's not just like one thing. Sometimes you're adding in other effects, you're adding in like post-production stuff. How long does it take you from like coming up with the idea for the shot through, like visualizing it and then going out and doing it and then post-production and like coming up with the finished product? Because I think a lot of times people watch these like stop motion or like, or hyperlapse sort of like, oh, this is what I got to get into a reel. I have to fit this into 60 seconds or whatever. Yeah. But the process takes a lot longer than that. So how long does it, on average take for
something like that Green Lantern shot? It took me probably about like maybe 6 to 8 hours from setting up all the rocks and then putting all the dirt down and then setting the figure up and then going in and doing the effects, which took another few hours to put my hand in there, crop all my rest of my arm out. So it's just like the effects usually take more than the actual shooting.
Yeah, so what's the longest you've spent on a shot?
Probably about like day and a half of just kind of figuring it out, figuring out what's going on, like trying to figure out a shot. If it didn't work, then kind of rearranging it.
What shot was that? Do you mind if I ask?
I'm trying to think. I want to say it was probably the Sentinel one that you were talking about, because it took me a long time to find like the inner parts to make it look like you threw through them.
Yeah, to find something that's sort of like
fire and stuff in there.
Yeah, like there's a lot of, I didn't think about that, like you don't have an actual like toy that you're just like, I'm going to burn a hole through this, and then it's going to have accurate inside parts on it.
I'm all for customization, but I'm not going to destroy a toy.
Where are you getting those like Sentinel toys? Because it's like this stuff. Like
from Marvel Legends, and they did like a special HasLab thing where it's like crowdfunding.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to have a Sentinel.
So how big is that? How big is that in reality?
That thing's huge.
Because it looks like it. Because I'm thinking like, I'm guessing that the Colossus is maybe like 6 inches, 8 inches tall.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Sentinel's got to be like a couple feet. Is my guess. Yeah, that's huge.
It's my biggest figure.
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty crazy. I am a huge like X-Men collector from way back then. So that's like, it's kind of it just like when you said that you kind of go to like Pinterest or whatever, like it's also like, it's just these comic book stuff, especially for this sort of thing, is like, that's a perfect storyboard to kind of like figure out moments. Also, you have some like anime stuff and like other things. There are things that are either in like like a cartoon cell or whatever, like that gives you an idea to work off of, I'm guessing.
Yes, exactly. I love, I have like a whole bunch of Pinterest things that I go through, and I have Marvel, DC, and all that stuff that I look at, and I can just be like, okay, this one I'm going to try to recreate.
You see that moment in something, like what was I don't know if it's what was something that like you let's talk about like things that you couldn't get the concept to work. I'm sure that you've run up against that. Something you're like, oh, this is going to be great. And then you're like, oh, I can't actually make that happen.
Struggling for the longest time to do a scene with Boba Fett and Han Solo fighting, where they're crashing through the floor, and every time I've tried to attempt it, it just turns out to look like garbage.
Well, you do, and I'm guessing that you were talking about like with the Green Lantern shot, like with the rocks and things, like you're creating the setting. This is something that I've seen in like a lot of like toy photography. Like I'm just kind of like the sets and like all of the work going into like I'm gonna like do rocks and dirt or like walls and all of these like set miniature set building. I'm like, this stuff is amazing. Do you have like a huge collection of like props for your toy shoots or?
Yeah, I've bought rocks. I bought aquarium rocks.
Okay.
So those have worked out a lot. Use those in a lot of shots. I got like cinder blocks that I use. I've broken a couple of those just to have little pieces of. So I've got trees that I just took logs and put little pieces of wood on the bottom of them. So there's a whole bunch of stuff I've done, but I cannot do those sets that those people build.
Oh yeah, there's like, was it
dioramas and stuff?
Jace Arts, I think is one of the, you familiar with his work? Like he does like these Spider-Man ones that have like tons of tiny little props to like be holding a coffee mug or something that's got like, I'm like, yeah, how are you doing that? Like do you have like a 3D printer that you're just like printing a tiny little mug on?
I have a friend that makes he makes diorama sets and stuff, and building brick walls, building garbage cans, and it's just amazing what these guys can do.
Yeah, it's nuts. So I mean, the cinder block, was that the Juggernaut? Yeah. Okay, that's another one like those again. Like it's an X-Men shot. Like it just immediately stuck out in my head, in such a great. I don't know the size, like the scale of the toys to another is like so perfect to the scale of like you imagine from the comic books. Like it just has a very, I don't know, like there's a very real feeling to these these toy photos that you don't necessarily, as like something like every time I see them by anybody like yourself who's like very good at it, and I see them and I just go like, wow, this is like, I would love to be able to do something like that. I can't. I don't know. My mind just doesn't work for that. I would be doing something like The Mandalorian with like an LED like behind to have my my setting, whatever. I'd be trying to shoot like on some not a green screen, but like an LED screen, like to create my backdrop.
There's people out there that are doing stuff with like they're putting their TVs behind their figures and stuff, and they've got their whole set out there, and I'm not really good with studio lighting. I mean, I'm okay, but that's not my strong suit. And there's guys out there that can just they have all these lighting set up, and like they buy these little tiny lights, and they're just amazing with them.
Yeah, I'm guessing like small LED lights would probably be the most, because you can get those ones that have like different colors. Like there's like basically the size of a phone. I've seen a lot of those that are like just very small, and they can do because you don't want something huge for these they're small. They're toys, but they're you don't need a giant like studio setup. You need small lights. Awesome. So did this you were saying that you just found those Legos in the house? So you were not a toy collector before, or
no? I mean, I had Legos from when I was a kid, but I just found these and I just decided I was going to go for it. So I never really started collecting action figures until this. I mean, I had little G.I. Joes and stuff growing up, but I had lost all those by the time I started doing photography.
So I mean, this has now turned into a major collecting thing for you, because I mean, it's a lot of different. You have a lot of different pieces. I think
after a couple months, I realized that I was collecting at that point.
So, just looking at all this stuff, you have from a lot of different genres, as you mentioned, like DC, Marvel, Star Wars. Like, what's your favorite genre to shoot?
It would have to be Marvel. I've always grown up loving Marvel. I read Marvel comics, movies. I love the movies. So Marvel has always been my favorite. Comics and Marvel. And those
Is X-Men your favorite comic? Because I see a lot of X-Men in there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. All right. I'm totally in support of that.
X-Men cartoon show was I lived off of that.
Well, I think it's actually one of the more kind of accurate to the comic book, like translations of like the X-Men story, as opposed to like the movie adaptations. You have to sort of like try to get everything into one movie or even like 2 or 3 movies, but you don't have like the sort of fleshing out. We're going to do a series where it's going to be weekly and we're going to do like 20 episodes. Like you have time to like make these storylines, and you can do a lot more with animation than you can with, real people, at least back then. Now we've got crazy special effects. I also noticed that you mix genres quite a bit. Like I see, and it's one of those things kind of as a, both as a Back to the Future fan and a Rick and Morty fan, like seeing all these Doc Brown, like sort of put into different scenarios, shots that are just like, it's awesome. What inspired you to do that stuff?
I was thinking about like who created the first lightsaber, and then I looked over and I saw my Doc Brown, and I was like, him, of course. Why not? And so that's how the picture came around. I was like, I just have to do a shot of him holding a lightsaber.
You have any other plans for any other mixed genre shots coming up?
Nothing I can think of. Mostly a lot of those just kind of happen on the fly. I'll be working on something and I'll just be like, oh, this would be fun with this character.
Just throw them in there.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like, I don't know. For me, maybe it's the way my mind works. I would have to like plan everything out, and like I'd probably have a list. Like I'm sitting here looking at a list of stuff for the podcast that I have like just like 800 things that I've written out, ideas. I don't know. Do you keep like a book of ideas for stuff, or you just like you said, you just come up with them? You're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, and that's what I'm just trying to knock it out today.
I kind of just I have a table. I put all the figures that I kind of want to do for the week or for that I have. Just put them together in groups. Like, oh, I'm going to work on these figures, and I want to do something with them. So it's kind of like I have ideas of what to do, and when I go out there, I figure out how I'm going to set them up.
So it's a little more free form.
Yeah.
So it's a little more like, just like spur of the moment, free form stuff. Like I don't know, that impressed me. My brain just doesn't work that way. So I find that so impressive. Just like the quality of what you're producing and the ability to just go like, I'm going to just do these today. And it'd be like, for me, I would be going crazy, overthinking it, being like, oh wait, what do I got to do? I find that extremely impressive, and kudos to you. So I have a question. Like, if somebody was like, and you're, like you said, fairly new to this, like in the last couple of years, if someone was looking to get into toy photography, what advice would you give them?
Get a toy, get a camera, your phone, anything, and just go for it. YouTube was a huge help for me when I first started. And there's so many places on there that will give you help. But you just kind of have to go for it. And you'll learn as you go how to hold your figures up, because that's always been the trouble, is, using wires and stuff. I usually find those at hardware stores and stuff.
So are you using like fishing line, or are you using like, what are you using, like actual wire that you're like then painting out in Photoshop?
It's a 16 gauge wire that I use, and you just kind of put it on the figure and kind of position it enough where it will kind of stand on its own and hope that it stays up. But when I first started it, I sucked at wires, but I've gotten a lot better. That's again, like, I don't know, like I have patience for a lot of things, and I don't know that I would get so frustrated with myself not knowing, like I don't know, that's something I have to get over. I think maybe I will start doing that, because I found in my parents' house, like all my old action figures and stuff are there. Like I bring them
And like, I was like, maybe I could start doing a little something, like old He-Man, Transformers, Star Wars, G.I. Joe stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll try something. But then I'm always like, I always feel overwhelmed by it, like not knowing where to start. So, I mean, like just in this conversation, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe it is possible. Just like starting at it, but I feel like I would get so frustrated.
Oh, it can get frustrating for sure, especially like when you put up a figure and it falls down for the 15th time.
How do you deal with the frustration? Because I mean, like you just like take a break and you're like, okay, I just leave this for a few minutes, or you push through and like get it done.
Yeah, I've had to push through a couple times, but walking away, just cool your head, try to figure out why it keeps falling down. But yeah, it can get frustrating for sure. I've decided not to shoot entire shots because I was like, okay, I can't figure this out. Like I said, with my the one I was doing with Boba Fett and Han Solo, I've done 3 shots, try to get it done, and I can't get it done. They all look like crap. So
yeah, you gotta keep coming back to it. It's like one of those, like it's sort of your grail quest to find out how to do this shot. And it's like that. I mean, that happens to me too. Like, I mostly do weddings, but it's like there's times when I'm like, okay, I want to get this shot, and I like sometimes the situation, like the scenario is not in place to like do that photo, or like you try to get it and it doesn't happen, and you don't have time to go back on a wedding day and be like, no, we're gonna stop and do this. But like there's things that I'm like, okay, that I want to get that shot at some point. Like just see it in my head, but I want to get to it. But yeah, I can imagine the it's the swing and a miss. I'm going to come back and try this one more time later. So how many shots have you done in like I guess like what, 2 years? Like how many would you say that you've produced at this point?
I don't even know. I usually try to go for
like on average, how many do you do in like a month?
So I try to do about 5 posts on Instagram. But sometimes I don't always get that. But on Instagram, I have 364 posts. So that's over 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's, I mean, do you actually, like, out of the stuff that you produce, do you publish all of it? Or is there things that, you're just like, that's just for me?
All of it.
Okay.
I don't really hold too much in
reserve.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's yeah. I really like your work. I think it's great. So I'm glad that you're putting it out there. Like there's sometimes where there are things that I shoot, like when I just go out and do. Well, I mean, are still a wildlife photographer as well, or
yeah. I mean, I'd love to go out and shoot wildlife and shoot landscapes and stuff, but it's just this has been just a big passion that's been taken over.
There are some things like when I shoot like a landscape that I won't publish it or do it or put it out. Sometimes I'm just like, that's just for me. Like, I don't know if anybody else would like it, but I like it, and I don't feel like putting it out into the world. There's just sometimes there are those things that I'm like, no, I don't need anybody else to see that. I'm happy with it as it is. I don't need somebody else going like, oh man, you should have used a higher depth of field. I'm like, whatever. I'm cool with just keeping it for myself.
Looking for a podcast all about nerddom?
Want a podcast with an emphasis on representation?
The Nerd Alternative is the podcast for you. Join me, Ram.
Me, Hassan.
And me, Levi.
3 Black British nerds tackling the pop culture we love and sharing why we love them. The Nerd Alternative, a sweet melting pot of all things nerdy.
Hey, listeners. Are you looking for a way to support the Nerdy Photographer or just show off your love for photography? Head over to nerdyphotographer.com and go to the merchandise section of our shop. That's right. There's merchandise. There's funny t-shirts, wall art with inspirational photography quotes, mugs for people who drink things, stickers. You take them and you stick them to other things. The kids love these. Gonna be huge. So head over to nerdyphotographer.com, click on the shop, and head to the merchandise section to get yours today. Merchandising. Hey.
And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. Ugh, this is always death.
Did you know that squirrels are responsible for most of the power outages in the United States?
Oh, I did not.
The American Public Power Association, or APA, says that squirrels are the most frequent cause of power outages, and that APA has even developed a data tracker called the Squirrel Index that analyzes the patterns and timing of squirrels' impact on electrical power system.
Wow.
It turns out the peak times of year for squirrel attacks on electrical lines are from May to June and October till November.
Why those months?
My guess is that's just, I don't know, like my guess is like that's sort of like after the winter, and they're like, there's a lot of, that's when their mating season is, I guess, or maybe not, I don't know. Like either like spring, like late spring says to me like, oh, we're out of the winter and we're kind of like, I don't know, I would say they hibernate, but I see them all the time during the winter where I'm at. So I don't know. And then like October to November is where, you know, in nut hauling season, we're trying to get as many nuts as possible. And they're probably running up and down the power lines. I see them where I live running on the power lines from like house to house. And they like run over people's roofs and like go to the next side and like jump on another power line and like run over to somebody else's house. They've got a whole system worked out. So, but yeah, the most common source of power outages, squirrels. The more you know.
All right.
Well, Anthony, thank you very much for being on the podcast. Where can our listeners find you and your work? I'm gonna include some of your shots in the episode notes and over on the blog. But where can people see more of your work?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok under Matea _toy_photography.
I'll include links to those accounts as well in the episode notes so that people can head over and see your incredible work. I really want more people to see it. Anthony, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. I'd like to thank my guest, Anthony Mattea, for being on the show. You can find Anthony's work on Instagram and TikTok at Matea _toy_photography. That's Matea, MATTEA _toy_photography. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can also follow along on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at The Nerdy Photo. Yes, that's at The Nerdy Photo. I do have a TikTok, and yes, I am surprised that it's getting a lot of attention somehow. And there's things other than the podcast on all of these social media platforms, so you should go check those out. Oh, while we were gone, F2.0 stopped in and showed me that there's a reset button on the Reality Shop software, and so now I know that.
And knowing is half the battle.
That's right, F2.0, and the other half is evenly distributed between red and blue lasers. At least we're back to our normal selves. Hopefully. Until next time, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.